Thank you for attending today. This is the person behind the brand on social media management, next in our series on social media matters. One of many free webinars provided by the Alternative Board, where I am the social media and public relations specialist, headquartered here in Colorado. You can see my LinkedIn profile there. I invite anyone to connect with me, or feel free to message me there as well if you have any questions about today's content, or if you have any questions about social media in general. And also I can help you get set up and give you insight as far as our other webinars that we provide from the Alternative Board on any number of topics. I'll just hop over to our national events page, where we have all kinds of webinars provided not just on social media but also on our BOSS, Business Owner Success Series webinars. We have ones coming up on creating a business plan, more on social media, being an effective follower on Twitter. We also have topics on sales forces and best sales practices. So all kinds of business-oriented webinar topics that are designed for your success. So I do encourage you to hop to our alternativeboard.com/national-events site to check those out. But again, today we're going to be talking about the person behind the brand in social media. And I used this correlation, which I think might be familiar to everyone, probably the best well-known brand out there as far as from when you were a child and forward, the Great and Powerful Oz. And that was excellent branding because what you saw was something quite powerful and enthusiastic and quite spellbinding, when in fact what you were dealing with was a regular human being that was operating the controls behind a curtain to present that image and present that brand to people who encountered him. So I wanted to kind of correlate that to how we are all the person behind the curtain trying to present a brand out to people. Hopefully, I mean, some people probably are presenting brands that are big and frightening and scary and powerful, but hopefully we're providing our own brands out there that are reflective of what we're offering and not quite so scary. But again, this gets down to the person that we are and how we need to present that and what best practices can be, particularly in social media, for getting that presentation out there. I wanted to cover 5 different topics today. Also, for anyone who's joined, I do have people muted just so we can get a clean recording today. But if you have a question, please feel free to use the chat window or raise your hand. You have a pull-down arrow next to your name in the participants window on your Ready Talk window, and you can raise your hand, or you can, again, type a question in the chat window, and I will have opening for questions at the end, or we can stop if it's a hot question. But the person behind your brand, the 5 things I want to talk about today are just, again, to help you get the nuts and bolts of this to have an effective presentation for your brand as you, the person, are running that. First, you want to choose your identity. Then you want to establish your tone, which again can flux a lot based on the ins and outs of everyday living, but you should have a general tone you want to adopt, or a couple of tones at least. Setting down the megaphone, adapting to your channel, whichever channel or channels you're using in your social media, and then keeping it real. And we'll touch on each of these as we get through today. First, I want to talk about choosing your identity. And this is just as if you're coming up with a business plan. You should really kind of get down, even if it's on one piece of paper, strategizing out what your identity on social media, on your brand, is going to be. Questions you want to ask are, who are you hoping to influence and attract? And this might seem like a very basic question when you're already probably asking yourself when you're marketing your business or company in any way. But it's important when you're looking at that on social media, because these are the people that you want to engage with the most on your social media, and therefore whatever your brand is and your identity that you're creating is going to obviously influence and attract those people. So you want to take a look at that, and how do you wish to be perceived by that group for the optimum impact? Research obviously may be required for this. You may be already doing that as far as your market research and how best to attract your customers. Same thing applies for social media and branding. You want to make sure whatever you're contributing to that online conversation can have the biggest sway and get you the most optimum fan base there, the people who are seeing what you're doing. And this is an important question. Does this identity you're selecting or establishing mesh with your authentic identity or the real you, who you really are in day-to-day life? Hopefully a lot of the time when you are engaging in company business of your company, that's pretty much reflecting back on who you really are and your ideals and what your goals are. So that's probably not going to be such a divergent area if you're the one who's managing your social media. However, if you have an additional person or individual who's managing your social media brand, you'll want to get them in on these other questions when you're planning everything. You want to make sure they're very aligned with what you're presenting and the brand that you intend to put out there, because if you're not, you might have that divergence where that authentic person doesn't really mesh with the brand you want to present, and then you're going to run into some problems. So just make sure there's some adequate training and awareness if you have someone managing your social media that they really get your identity that you want to present. So that's just some tips. And I did a little word cloud here just for some ideas of things you might want to focus on to describe yourself. You could be a resource. You want to come forth as a bank of resource for some people out there who need some information or facts or just expertise in a certain area. So again, that gets down to you could be an expert in a certain area. Perhaps your identity is all about educating people on a certain topic or just education in general. You might be focused mostly on service for a certain area, or perhaps you're just you want to be a helpful identity. And again, these are not isolated to just one word. You could be a combination of a couple things. You might want to be an executive resource, which I would probably call the alternative word that. Just something where executives come to you for insights and resources for how they can best conduct their own business and their own identity. So there's definitely different combinations and different tactics you can employ here to set up your identity. And I wanted to get into this a little bit too. Obviously, based on how your unique identity is set up, you're going to come across social media a little different with different approaches. For instance, if you're product driven, you're probably going to want to post a lot of pictures and videos that highlight what you offer, including updates that focus on the special features of what you provide. So that's going to be a lot of visuals there. People want to see the product, and see what you're dealing with and what you're offering. Whereas you might come across your identity as an expert, so you might want to be posting pictures instead of your staff, of those real people that people can see are tangible experts with experience in the specialty that you're offering, and also posting solution and engaging with some Q&A on your social media channels to really say, hey, we're real people and we are experts here for you, and that you can provide that to them. And again, these are not mutually exclusive. You could be an expert on your products. So again, it can kind of come down to what your different identity is that you want to set up. Say if your identity is about service, you're going to want to ask your followers questions to get a good idea of what they need from you. Doing that research needs of your target audience, also posting the solutions you provide, and you really do pretty much in all social media, but really you have to do a lot of listening here as well, because they are going to be asking you questions and coming to you for solutions to help them, because obviously if they need service on something, something's not working and they need that help. And then professional identity, that's where you've got that board meeting persona on in any time that you're engaging on your social media. You're not casual. You're not out at the bar having a beer with these people. You're actually, they want you to be on your game and be a professional for whatever question or area that you have claimed to be that. So that's just, again, how your identity comes across. You might want to be professional or service-oriented, or any of the other words that we had talked about, or your own words that I did not put on that slide. So again, it's kind of establishing that, taking the time to set up what your identity is going to be. The next part would be establishing your tone. And here's some questions to ask. And tone, again, is how you're coming across. And we all know tone, when you're speaking to someone, you've got all kinds of body language going on, and that helps to accentuate your tone. You don't have that on social media. You do have pictures and videos you can help present, but a lot of it is very text-heavy, text-driven, timing-driven. So tone is incredibly important as you are trying to establish how your brand is being established by the person who is you. What tones will your target audience respond to best? This gets back again to probably the research you've done on your target audience. What are they going to respond to? I also want to emphasize that you want to look at, as you get into social media messaging, what is successful and what is not successful. What are some of the things you're putting out there that are getting a lot of likes, a lot of shares, retweets on Twitter, versus are you sending out messages that are getting zilch? You've got a couple people like it, but no one's really seeing it. No one really cares about it. That can really help you establish, say, okay, well, what was my tone in that? Maybe I should use different wording next time. So again, trying to establish that best practice there. Will you use certain tones for certain updates? So, again, if you're communicating out, you've got a new product coming out versus if you are trying to communicate an alert of something and that's going on a trend in your area, you might have a different tone for those different types of things. But that, again, gets back to your purpose. What are you being entrusted to communicate as you go forward? So I just remember to ask these questions as you're establishing your tone. And I've got, again, a couple of words here that you can use. Are you going to be like a newsroom for your fans where you're providing facts and trends and latest news out there? You're an aggregator of that, those updates. Or are you going to be witty? Are you a cautious, kind of person? I always think of the stock market and that, like, just be careful. Are you coming across as very creatively minded? Or are you casual? Sometimes that will work for a brand, company brand, if they just have a casual tone to themselves. I would think intelligent would probably span all areas, but that might be kind of your bread and butter to really come across as you've got that intellect, your counseling, detailed, all these kind of things. And again, just a few ideas of what you could focus on as far as your tone. And again, not mutually exclusive. You could have different tones for different types of updates. And just again, some ideas for what to focus on. I just took a obviously recent occurrence, the Boston Marathon bombing. If you're a newsroom tone, you're going to be probably sharing out the updates from the news sources coming out, and you're going to just be sharing them out or rebroadcasting them with links. Not so much personal opinion, you're regurgitating the facts. And that's what you've established that you're trusted to do, so that's your tone for your newsroom. Versus counseling, you could, if you're coming across in that tone, in that kind of instance, you might say, hey, we want to help share out resources. How's everyone doing? Please feel free to use this as a sounding board. We want to help and stuff like that. So again, not saying either is better than the other, but it's about which tone you've decided to adopt in certain situations. And then getting into something a little less heavy, a major company event, again, you might have a company where the brand tone is appropriate to be funny, where you could tie the event's purpose into something that's pop cultural or relevant, playing on words. People like to laugh. Obviously, you've got I always think of the Zingers by Chandler Bing on the show Friends, where that was a lot of people like to come across that way, and that just helps you remember things. It's brief, it's funny, and it kind of pops. That might be how your tone comes across. And kind of tying into that, you could also be casual, very conversational. That would be crafted as if you're speaking to someone, a coffee shop barista or a fellow shopper at a store. You're not pressured. You're just trying to engage in a conversation and get some feedback, have some back and forth there, which can help you establish that relationship with a possible customer. So again, there's different options for how to do your tone. I like this one about setting down the megaphone. This really comes into play where social media is very much an online conversation. And what's wrong with this picture, and let's just highlight some things where you see this big person with a huge megaphone in their face, and it's aimed directly at you, most likely with the volume up. So what's wrong with it? The content is going in one direction. You've got someone who's going to be yelling things at you, and really there's no opportunity to come back with it. It's all output from them, no input from you, who's on the receiving end of the megaphone. The general feeling is that engagement is trumped by the announcement, so that this person with the megaphone is just giving you a barrage of instructions and announcements, and the fact is, no one likes to be yelled at or yelled to constantly. So in keeping with that, I wanted to remind people that this is kind of what you're searching for. You do want to announce things on your social media, but you want to have a back and forth. You want there to be some conversation going on where the people that you're speaking with really feel like you're listening. Your brand or your person that behind that brand is receptive to the engagement. That you're out there, you're listening, you're seeing if someone responds or comments on one of your updates, you can respond right back to that. You don't have to leave that alone if it's appropriate. You don't want to hound them, but you want to be receptive and let them know you're listening. The two-way conversation and the interaction occurs, and that's ideally what you want to have in your social media. That's what's going to get you the biggest return and the biggest coming back of people to revisit you. And that's how most real people enjoy communicating. So why shouldn't that be the same on social media? Even newsrooms nowadays with news sites, they have comment sections where people can participate and feel like they're engaging and feel like they're part of that news going on. It's going that way, and it's really about having that two-way instead of a one-way. You're not a billboard in this scenario. You should actually really be engaging and trying to have that conversation with people on your brand, on your social media channels. So just some tips there. The next thing I wanted to get to is adapting to your channel of choice. Now, I only highlighted 4 here. There are tons of social media channels out there, but these, in my opinion, are the big 4. And each of these has its own approach. And just in case you weren't aware, this is Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Google+. Again, just 4 of many. And each has its own approach, and I thought it would be helpful to kind of visualize what the approaches should be and how these channels are different. So I'm going to come into this slide. So Facebook, I've always seen Facebook as a kind of a coffee shop feel. Whereas if you go into a Starbucks nowadays, you can see people, like a little group of people here who are sitting there just enjoying each other, having some conversation over some coffee. However, back in the corner there might be someone who's actually conducting business on a Bluetooth headset and on their laptop, and this might be their office away from home. And that's happening on Facebook. It's very social, it's very interactive, but there's a business purpose behind it as well on Facebook pages. People have company pages or communities or purposes out there where they're a little bit more intent on accomplishing a goal. So I equate that to Facebook. I think you can be absolutely professional in a coffee shop because you can have the garb on of a professional, and you can have the tools there at your disposal. You're engaging in business, and that's absolutely appropriate as long as you can conduct it in that coffee shop feel. And then just right over there, you've got some people who are not so businessy, very much more casual, but it can all happen in the same realm. So I see Facebook as a coffee shop kind of feel. Then you've got Twitter over here. And I see Twitter very much as a person who stands up on, and tries to grab attention. They're getting on their Twitter feed, and they're going to tweet things out and hope that people around them are going to listen. Obviously, some of these people over here are not listening, but it's really where you're kind of broadcasting out to anyone and everyone who might be within shouting distance, or in this case on the internet, that they can hear you and either receive your message or blow it off or respond to it, come talk to you later. But Twitter is very public in that regard. It's, again, anyone within the sound of your voice, thus anyone who's on an internet connection can see your tweet and then choose to respond to it or not. So think of it that way, where it's very public and there's nothing private about tweeting out. So just keep that in mind. Then I've also got over here, we've got LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is quite professionally oriented, and I know they're really geared to stay that way as well. But here you've got a picture of some people in business garb, and they're in a business setting, and they're having probably a business-oriented, engaging conversation. It's all very on point to be very professional. So again, that's something to keep in mind. If you're engaging on LinkedIn, you're going to keep it professional, keep it to an executive level. You're not necessarily going to share out, hey, I just really enjoyed the strawberry yogurt I had. You're going to keep it relegated to things that are business oriented, and that's what that community is for. And then I was trying to think of an appropriate visual for Google+, and I came up with an expo. And I think that's appropriate. I like this one because it had a globe in there, because really Google+ is quite global. It's if you post something on Google+, I say like a URL for your website, that gets optimized, and it gets in the search engines, and anyone can really find it. Anything you do on Google+, if it's not directly like a private message to somebody, that's going to be probably public. But Google+, I also chose the expo because people are on an expo. They're out there to be seen and to kind of increase their visibility. And while all of these venues can do that for you, I would say Google+ is probably the strongest in that aspect because, again, that search engine of Google is behind Google+. And so if you're putting things on Google+, you're going to be a lot easier to find. Thus the expo visual is that you're not only public, but you really want to be seen. You really want to get out there and be searchable. And so that's why I thought the expo was appropriate. So again, obviously different audiences and different feels to each one of these 4, which are just 4 of many social media channels. So you want to really feel that out and know what you're dealing with and how that's going to impact your branding and how you as a person are going to approach that on these channels. Let's go forward. Lastly, I wanted to talk about keeping it real. And this, I think, is additionally just hugely important. You want to remember that people out there engaging with you and your brand, they know that there is a person behind that avatar. There's a person behind that logo that you have that you keep putting out there, or those stock images. There's a real person out there who's typing responses or typing updates. And you have to imagine, how would you as a person react in a conversation where a positive outcome is your goal, but you have spectators who are watching that conversation take place? That's exactly what's happening on social media. You can have a conversation and engage with people, but there are people watching that. So you have to have that authenticity and that caution as you're engaging in that kind of format. So I want you to think about that. And again, it's part of your strategy, because this is going to happen. If you engage on social media in any prevalent way, you're going to find yourselves in the midst of, hey, I've still got my brand messaging to get out, but look, this breaking news is going on. And I have to imagine, how am I as a real person expected to respond to that when that's going on? Prominent trends are going on. I should really have some kind of input on that, or should I put my input out there? Oh my gosh, I've got negative feedback appearing on my page. I don't want to just duck and cover and pretend it's not there, because again, you have spectators who are seeing someone posted something negative on your page. Well, how are you going to deal with that? How will you as a real person react to that when you want a positive outcome? And genuine questions people might have on your brand. They might tweet you a question or get one on your Facebook page or your LinkedIn. They want questions answered, and again, people are seeing that. Unless they private message you, you've got people watching how you're going to respond. So authenticity is huge. I want you to really try to adhere to that, knowing that these people realize a real person is going to respond. If you're doing it on behalf of your brand, you should have some authenticity there. And here are some ways to keep it real but using it with caution. I wanted to talk about your true authenticity of your real person. These are areas that you probably want to avoid getting really authentic with. I always advise people, unless you're actually a brand that is on behalf of a political party, probably stay out of the politics. And I try to not post stuff that's swaying one political way or another. If I do, I make it very open-ended, but you have to be careful with that as well. You want to try to avoid posting anything that's ultimately polarizing. Again, this is assuming you don't have a brand that is out there specifically to address a polarizing factor, but you want to avoid that. You obviously want to avoid anything that's offensive, that you just know if you post it, someone's going to get offended by it. You can't stay away from this 100% because you just never know. You never know what is going to offend one person, but it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. You want to be authentic, but you also don't want to offend people, because remember, you want that positive outcome. I also encourage people to not get overly personal when you update out there. And again, I come at that from that expert tone or that expert identity. You want to have experts. Say you have a law firm or whatever. You have experts there that are coming forth and providing their expertise. But you don't want to provide stuff that you wouldn't provide on a website, say, that you're registering for. You're not going to provide your Social Security number, your home address, or things of that nature where your kids go to school. Obviously, keep it real. Use that caution. That all makes sense. And, of course, you want to stay out of religion. Religion and politics are two things to stay out of unless your brand deals directly with that. I would advise against trying to post something there. And if you do post anything of this nature, if you feel like you have to post something, make it a question your audience can respond to it, but you also don't want to incite a riot on your page or on your social channel. So again, really look at these areas. It's often better than not to just don't post anything. If when in doubt, don't do it. So I just want to advise you to use cautions in there. And again, different tips for keeping it real as far as how you're dealing with your brand authentically. Use tact. I actually used this analogy recently with the whole Boston bombing and how different social media brands out there were or were not responding or inputting after that was going on. And a lot of social media was involved with that as far as people engaging about the bombing on social media. And I equate it to, okay, a lot of chatters going on online about strictly the bombing and the Waterton getting locked down. And I feel like you should implement tact where the last thing you want to do in the midst of all that is jump up and yell, hey, we have a really cool webinar on something totally unrelated coming up. You want to have that tact where you're like, you know what, everyone and their brother is talking about this emergency going down. it's probably not the best time for me to just yell something out that has nothing to do with any of that. And again, that's a wasted effort too, because you're not going to get anyone who's going to want to pay attention to that right then, because everybody's talking about that other thing. So again, use tact like you would in a normal conversation. Pausing before posting, and this kind of applies to if you get like a visceral reaction on your page or someone has a negative input. If you're doing this on behalf of your company, your social media on behalf of your company, obviously it's a little hard sometimes to separate that personal from the business. So if someone says something negative, you're going to be like, that reaction, that knee jerk. Don't post that. Don't respond to that right away. You don't have to. Take that break, walk away, assess what's happening, and then really kind of craft your response before you post it so that you can, again, go for that optimum outcome. And don't ever have that knee-jerk posting or reaction. You want to also get a pulse on the situation before reacting, and that kind of ties in with the pausing. You want to make sure you're like, okay, what are all the factors feeding in here? Who am I engaging with as far as like what do I have to factor into my thinking as I do? Are they coming from a certain place that I didn't consider? Consider the source and just kind of take that pulse before you respond. And it's also all about perception. When you do respond or when you are posting something on your page, remember it's going to be perceived by your fans a certain way. You just want to take a moment and assess that, how your post is going to be perceived. And that's essentially the nuts and bolts of person behind your brand. Very quick overview. And again, we always want to get back to this nice man who gave Tin Man his heart. Very nice, and he was very helpful. And this is the real person, not as scary as the Great and Powerful Oz. But this is the person people are interacting with to actually get help or engage with on social media. So just wanted to remind you of that. And I want to open it up now if anyone has any questions. And also just to remind
The conference
you that,
has been unmuted.
we have future webinars and topics at the Alternative Board site here. And does anyone have any questions about today? And again, I'll be available on my LinkedIn. I can also I'll type my email address here in the chat window. But you're welcome to email me any questions you might have going forward too. If you have any questions about how to execute your social media or anything like that, I can definitely provide that assistance to you. And if no one has any questions, I can go ahead and close it out. But I will also be sending out a recording of the webinar, and as well as a little kind of white paper cheat sheet you can keep up for when you're crafting all these things for your person behind your brand. Any questions? Okay. Well, I appreciate everyone showing up. And again, I'll send this out, and feel free to share it out to others who you know might benefit from it. And I appreciate you attending, and we will see you at a future webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please stand by.